Welcome back to the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL. It is the first Monday in March 2024. That's right. March Madness in more ways than one. And to talk about it with us right now, site publisher Tim Watts. Tim, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
And also Andrew Bone down there in the middle Hollywood Square. Andrew Bone. Andrew, how you doing on this Monday?
I'm good.
All
Went to
right.
the beach all weekend, so
Yeah.
So back
Nice.
back in the muck,
Back in it, back in the middle of it. And man, like I said, so much to get into, guys. We're going to talk recruiting, both on the commitment front, a flip of a flip for Alabama, a big one for Kalen DeBoer, where the 2025 cycle is concerned. We've got spring practice getting underway under Kalen DeBoer for the first time since 2006. No Nick Saban at an Alabama spring practice. It's going to be a little weird, but exciting at the same time. So we'll talk with Jimmy Stein a little bit later in the program about that. Jimmy, our team expert, is going to join us coming up shortly down the road. But guys, we've got men's basketball to talk about. It is March Madness officially now as we get into that. But you guys specifically wanted to start with the news of Antonio Coleman from over the weekend. And before we do that, I've got to pull up this clip. All right. We've got to give Tim a victory lap of sorts here as we get the show going. Bit of a victory lap here for our leader, Tim Watts. Here's what Tim had to say last Thursday here on the YouTube home for BOL when he was asked from our roundtable mailbag the possibility for maybe a silent commitment and or a flip possibility. And so here's Tim. Here's what he had to say.
We had a good nugget this week on Antonio Coleman. I think if a guy's going to flip, he could be.
Yeah, that's silent, but deadly. If it's Antonio Coleman,
it's still 10 months away. I mean, if it's someone, and I'm not, Coleman would be a commitment to another school that indicates I still want to come or something. I can't think of anybody like a silent commitment. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. It would most likely for me be a guy committed to another school right now.
There it is. He said it, Tim Watts. And Tim, as we've seen here, Andrew, in the last 48 hours, it appears as if Antonio Coleman is back in the Bama fold. Tell us, Tim, we'll start with you and then move on to Andrew as well, how all this sort of unfolded.
I just think that Alabama was always there with him. There was confusion. And if you remember back to when he flipped in December, dude, it was a madhouse, right? Ryan Williams was going to Auburn. We had his teammate Lacey, the quarterback, was visiting Auburn. So there was a lot, talking to people close to him. There was a lot in his head that got confusing. Now, the one thing that's really helped Alabama, in my opinion, is Freddie Roach has been there his whole recruitment for 3 years at least. He might know him even longer. And then you throw in Kane Womack, who was at South Alabama, certainly familiar with the Saraland program. So I just think, we say relationships matter. I don't care about the NIL. I mean, that's obviously a factor, but relationships matter because at the end of the day, if everybody's got an equal offer on the table, who are you going with? The guy you trust, the guy you know most. So I think that relationships won out here.
Andrew, not just a big pickup for 2025 in general, but to maintain that sort of Mobile area pipeline with all the success going back to Nick Saban in 2007, 2008, and how foundationally important it was to get the Burton Scotts and the Julio Jones and the Mark Barons at the time. Talk about it from that standpoint too, and being able to sustain that.
Yeah, I think obviously Mobile is always going to be a hotbed, especially if they have a lot of talent down there in each recruiting cycle. Started with that 2008 class. I mean, it's absolutely loaded, and continued to carry over. And we're going to continue to see a lot of talent down there, and it's kind of the same this year. Ryan Williams was supposed to be in this 2025 class originally, so the Mobile was going to be absolutely stacked. If he would have stayed in that 25 class, but there's still a lot of talent down there with Antonio Coleman. You got KJ Lacey, who's also at Saraland, is committed to Texas, but a lot of schools still recruiting him. You have Micah DeBoer's over at Viger High School, one of the top interior offensive linemen in the country. So, you know, what was it, 2-3 months ago, all we were hearing about was Mobile was Auburn territory now because Ryan was going to flip. Antonio Coleman had just flipped. Micah DeBoer's was heavily leaning towards Auburn, so it was a new era down in the Mobile area. But as we saw, Ryan stuck with Alabama or committed back to Alabama. Coleman flips. Now looks like Micah DeBoer's, as of right now, leaning towards LSU. So we'll kind of see what happens down there. But it's kind of funny. Tim and I had been talking about Coleman for the last couple of weeks, and you go back and you read the commitment story that we wrote on Saturday, and it says, you go back, you read the opening paragraph, and it says Antonio Coleman flipped his commitment to Alabama on Saturday. We didn't edit that story from last Saturday. That story was written about a week ago. Oops. So we had it ready. We had it in the admin ready to go. We had both had heard some stuff behind the scenes that made us pretty confident that things were about to go down with Coleman to Alabama. And these are from people down in Mobile, the sources that we have down there. And, we felt very confident that it was going to happen. We weren't sure when it was going to happen, but, a week from this past Saturday, went ahead and wrote the story, had it ready to go. I was walking out onto the beach, going to a wedding this weekend when that news broke. So we had it ready to go whenever it hit. So yeah,
I hated it went right before the Tennessee game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the timing was kind of tough.
Coleman isn't a guy that you probably can guide through this. I think when he's just an emotional guy, but that right before the Tennessee would have been really good after the Tennessee game in hindsight, or on Sunday morning. But yeah, obviously a guy that's and again, relationships. How do you manage that when somebody gets you confused? You go back, you keep that relationship, you don't panic, you keep that there. And again, Alabama's had that stability with Freddie Roach.
And the last two in-state commitments, both from Saraland, commit right before a basketball game.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of funny because it wasn't just other people saying, every SEC school saying they're not sure Kalen DeBoer can recruit, which is absurd. We don't know yet. And then even guys on our own message board, Alabama fans are wondering why he's not loading up on commits he barely knows in the dead period. Well, this is a guy they knew extremely well. So, first one's a big one, and there's a lot of people between these fan bases who shut the hell up on Monday morning. They're quiet, like Kobe did in the Olympics. Shh.
Crickets. Wow. Hey, and Tim's absolutely correct. I mean, in every form of life, relationships matter, and Freddie Roach sustaining his place and actually elevating in title under Kalen DeBoer certainly had to help Alabama. And you've got staff movement the other way at some other places too. So it's literally day to day in this era of college football. But you guys talk about the arrival of March and the dead period comes to an end, Andrew. What about some visitors of note? Because Alabama hits the practice field later this afternoon for the first time under Kalen DeBoer. You think about the upcoming weekend, going to be busy on that front too, right?
Well, it's a busy week. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It starts today. There's recruits on campus. Not many, just a few. We'll start seeing more guys fluctuate in throughout the week from Wednesday. Wednesday's a big day. Friday's a even bigger day. But today, Marcus Garcia, who is a four-star interior lineman from Texas, he's going to be making his way to Tuscaloosa. Doesn't have an offer right now, but has probably about 20-something offers. He was offered by Kalen DeBoer at Washington. So it'll be interesting to see if we see an offer to Marcus Garcia today. There's a couple in-state recruits on campus. Don't have many offers, but we could see some offers pop in over the course of the next couple months. But I think Wednesday's kind of the day that I'm looking forward to seeing Caleb Cunningham, 5-star wide receiver out of Mississippi. He's making his way back over. Darrell Johnson, who is one of the top overall athletes in the country. Really intrigued to see kind of what position he's going to end up playing. You look back at his original ranking at On3, he was ranked as a quarterback. and he was actually recruited more so as an athlete. He told me last week, safety or linebacker, 6'1", 200 pounds, but number 2 athlete in the country. Alabama's really excited about getting him on campus. And those are just some of the early bigger names that are going to be on campus, to start the week.
Tim, in terms of how this is laying out under this staff relative to what we saw with Nick Saban, does it pretty much line up? I mean, is recruiting in a lot of ways? You're limited by dead periods and active periods and when and who you can bring on campus.
Yeah. I mean, Alabama's still building these relationships. I mean, they come from the other side of the country. So they're not necessarily familiar with a lot of guys in the deep South. They weren't recruiting this area. It wasn't that they recruited nationally. So those relationships are being built. You're getting to know. And also, we're going to say this, they're still evaluating people. I don't think most people really get the coaching staffs don't offer off rankings. Not the good ones. You know what I mean? The ones trying to win a number 1 recruiting ranking, at USC, like Lane Kiffin did when he took a guy that was a clear non-qualifier JUCO to get the points to be number 1, which was a crafty move. But for the most part, they're evaluating because Kalen DeBoer will not like everybody. His staff won't like everybody Saban did. And he will like guys Nick Saban didn't. And if you look for a classic example, look at who's expected in today. Marcus Garcia, 6'5", 270-pound offensive lineman, very similar to Jackson Lloyd, who's in that same ballpark, 6'6", 280. So we're seeing lighter, the old Alabama staff consider these guys tight ends, I think. They were 50 pounds too light. So, I mean, you're seeing a different – and nothing's wrong with either philosophy. You're recruiting for what you're putting on the table. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of guys you want. So, yeah, recruiting's recruiting. Alabama's still a big brand. You know how I know? Because everybody's telling me they're just a normal brand now. They wouldn't be telling me if that was actually true.
So, Andrew, in terms of importance relative to the very, I guess, still early stages, it seems like we're a year ahead on the recruiting calendar these days. So, as far as evaluations go, is there a particular area of this Alabama football team where there already feels like there's a bit more emphasis on filling some holes, or is it always go back to positional value? You can never have enough bigs. You can never have enough quality tackles or defensive tackles or corners or, what are you seeing on that front?
Yeah, you have to continually evaluate your roster. You have to look at the guys that you signed from last year's class. You have to go through spring practice. You have to see where you're at. With guys who may have been there for a year, 2 years. Where are they at? Do you need to go out and try to add some more players at that position? Are you potentially going to lose some players after spring practice because they're upset because they're still number 2 or number 3 on the depth chart? They might go look elsewhere. So that's always something that you got to pretty much pay attention to. But you're always going to evaluate. You're never going to stop evaluating. The spring's a very important evaluation period where coaches are going to go out on the road to see kids, but you're also going to get kids on campus and try to figure out, do they have the right mentality to play here? Are these guys that we want to be around our program? Can they sit down in a film room, dissect film? How quickly can they learn things? And then you go out during spring practice, you watch them participate in their own spring practices, and then you get them on campus for either a summer camp or for an official visit. So, it's going to be position by position. I think, you look at the big board that we have on the BOL roundtable right now, and you look at the positions where there might be 15 plus offers, and that's at wide receiver. Offensive line, there's about 10 offensive linemen who've been offered. Defensive line is kind of interesting because it seems like they've been really selective there. There's not a ton of defensive line offers, but then you get down to defensive backs, probably 15 plus defensive backs that have been offered. Even though Alabama signed a great defensive back class last year, they're still going to be going after a lot of elite defensive backs and wide receivers. So going to be an interesting, next couple months on the evaluation, side, because quarterback, there's only a couple quarterbacks that they're recruiting right now, and those guys are committed elsewhere. So do they potentially offer a guy that's not committed? Potentially even another guy that is committed, but Juju Lewis, who's going to be coming into Tuscaloosa later this week, he's going to be making an unofficial visit on Friday. USC commitment, 5-star. A lot of eyes are on him. Will they be able to get Deuce Knight on campus? Notre Dame commitment, who's seems to have a lot of interest still in Alabama and speaking to Alabama on a regular basis. Those are some of the guys that we're watching pretty closely right now.
Hey,
The
Tim,
one real
go
quick,
ahead.
Travis, on the defensive backs, one thing I want to note was it was more of a corner heavy class, right? This way he uses his safeties and these guys they're looking at, I'm telling you, Derek Smith is one of my favorite prospects. And I'd like to see him more in a bigger setting and that. But Derek Smith's going to be one of the best safeties, I think, in the nation. Fagans from Thompson High School is another one. Merritt, who they offered from Parker, offered. So we're seeing like they are. Andrew's right. They're really confident in their DBs and wide receivers. But I think that's where they really know that's going to make the engine run, right? That's going to make their offense and their defense run when they can do those kind of things. But that's a good point about how some are heavier position-wise than others.
Yeah, there's a couple wild cards, too, in that 2024 class. Drake Kirkpatrick Jr., Red Morgan. How are they going to be utilized, right? Are they going to be safeties? Could they play corner? Can they play that sort of star position as it was previously known in Alabama's defense? Sounds like it's going to be utilized a little bit differently with Kane Womack. So a lot of things that I guess, guys, you need to get this 2024 group on the practice field starting today, and then systematically figuring out, okay, do we have all the fits that we need for what we're going to do? Because it's not going to align. Kalen DeBoer isn't reinventing the wheel, Tim, but it's not going to line up like for like. I don't expect that anyway.
No, I agree with you. I think when you look again, we just because we don't know whether the answer could be on campus. So when you're looking at tackle, they might walk in and find 3 guys they absolutely love. They might walk in and find guys they don't love. There's going to be a lot to like. Let's be honest. Nick Saban knew how to recruit, and that staff knew how to recruit. There's going to be a lot to like in that locker room, but there's going to be things that aren't necessarily a system fit. So you got to that's going to be important with the way the offense and defense is run. But there will be guys that leave because they don't fit, and there's going to be guys that we're maybe not expecting to be in the rotation as much who are going to jump up there in positional value for them.
We appreciate everybody tuning in, and if you are among those who are tuned in right now and you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel for BamaOnLine.com, we would certainly hope you would do so. We would appreciate it greatly. Hit the like button if you're tuned in right now as well. Also, turn on those notifications so you get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here on the BOL home for YouTube. Tim Watts, Andrew Bone coming up in just a little bit. We'll be joined by Jimmy Stein. Hey, Andrew, I wanted to ask you from a staff perspective, are there a couple of guys that you already have circled from a recruiting standpoint? Guys that you think are going to have that synergy and really be able to connect out on the trail as we get back into a live period here?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look on the offensive side, Jamarcus Shepard, is the first guy that really jumps out. A lot of energy, connecting well with a lot of recruits. You look back at Caleb Cunningham, the 5-star who's going to be in Tuscaloosa on Wednesday. He said that he dropped his top 12 schools. Everybody drops the top 12, top 15 this time of the year. But Caleb said he wasn't going to include Alabama in his top 12 just after the coaching staff turnover. Been hearing from a lot of different schools. And even though he's, just across the state in Mississippi, he wasn't going to include Alabama in his top 12. But then he met with Coach Shepard and just absolutely loved his energy, felt an instant connection there. And he said Alabama was pretty much a no-brainer for him to be in that top 12. So he's going to be over on campus on Wednesday, and we'll kind of see how things go there. But on the defense side of the ball, one name that I continue to hear from a lot of different recruits is Colin Hitchler, defensive backs coach, came down from Wisconsin and also coached at Cincinnati. Talking to a lot of different defensive backs, he's done really well. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Eric Wolford when he first arrived in Tuscaloosa. Wolf was a guy that we didn't really know that well. We knew he was at South Carolina, then he went to Kentucky. But every single offensive line recruit that I talked with shortly after he arrived already had a previous relationship with him. That he had been recruiting him for a year or two, and it seems that way with Coach Hitzler and a lot of these defensive backs that we've been talking to, a lot of these safeties and even some linebackers that are from the Northeast have a great relationship with him already. So I'm really intrigued to kind of see what he's able to do in this first recruiting cycle at Alabama.
Tim,
Colin was big with Keon Saab. We found out after the fact. He was big because he had a short window to sell him on how he fit. Obviously, there was a relationship there with Courtney Morgan, but we found that out after the fact that Colin was huge of getting him in there. Womack and Morgan obviously played a factor, but selling him on what he could do with him was a big selling point for him. So that's a good one. I agree.
Tim, in terms of guys no longer on the staff, biggest shoes to fill. T-Rob comes to mind. That's where a lot of people, I guess, would go to, Andrew. What's the void, the biggest void maybe that Alabama needs to fill on that front?
On the recruiting standpoint? Yeah. I mean, I think you caught some breaks. I mean, obviously, Freddie Roach staying and knowing the state the way he does. Robert Gillespie staying. And hey, Georgia made a massive push for Robert Gillespie. The massive push for him, decided to stay. But him knowing the state of Florida the way he did, and both Roach and Gillespie dabbled in Georgia. I think those moves were obviously huge. I'm still curious how the offensive line is going to do. Coach Cap's got a great relationship. I mean, great reputation for being a guy. Guys, I know the AD at Baylor don't love him, obviously, some of those comments, but the coaches at Baylor did love him, and said he handled his departure and everything the right way. So I think he's the one, and not just the biggest shoes to fill. I think it's I'm most curious about, because what is that offensive line philosophy going to be? We know what Kalen DeBoer did. We saw a 280th center, but we also see a 315 to 320 offensive guard about to go in the first 60 picks of the draft. So, I think they're just going to pick and match. I think they're looking for a skill set, an athleticism type, probably who can pull, who can one-on-one. That's the one thing coaches kept mentioning, one-on-one. They kept saying vertical block, but that's just getting on your man and pushing him back. It's a very simple concept. It sounds pretty good. So I'm most curious about him. But I also agree with Andrew on Cap and on Shepard and those guys doing a really good job of kind of building those relationships. And I'll tell you one thing, Kalen DeBoer seems to be a massive hit. Kalen DeBoer seems to be, and Nick Saban was that way. It was, hey, they're trailing. Saban went in home, Alabama's leading. That was a very common theme with how good he was. And Kalen DeBoer, you can see he's kind of got that outgoing personality. You can even see him at the basketball game this week, hanging out with some golfers. Y'all know the name and I don't. Hanging out with Nick Saban. You know what I mean? Darian Reed sitting in the back of that awesome selfie, by the way, being unnoticed. I was like, hey,
just a 5-star.
He's the one I like the most in that group. But yeah, you can see he's got a good personality and seems to be. He's very visible. Very visible.
There was no way Rob G was going to Athens. He's a Gator, man. I guess that didn't stop Trevor Etienne though from going from Florida to Georgia this offseason.
Yeah, there's and you saw the comments on, Steve Spurrier had on Billy Napier.
Oh gosh.
Something foul in Gainesville.
Oof. That's rough when
Andrew
when the
might
goat
have missed this while he was drinking Mai Tais in his European song.
That takes me back to Pat Dye and Terry Bowden or something, back in the day.
That was just, Spurrier ain't one to give credit, but that was like, throwing the first hand.
Yeah, just go ahead and buy the guy out when Steve's coming out publicly like that on him. But well, hey, Andrew, man, always great stuff with us here on the show, and certainly a ton of great stuff with us right there at BamaOnLine, that Antonio Coleman commitment story, among other things you can find from Andrew Bone, senior recruiting editor for BOL. Andrew, we'll let you get back to it.
Very busy week. Very, very busy week.
Very busy week on the recruiting front.
Hey, Andrew Joseph, that's a great list we built, but we probably missing a ton of guys because they're able, some of them, you got to talk to you're basically talking your parents into skipping school to come here in the week. So, and some parents will, I wasn't much on the.
You get an excuse. It's a college tour. Tour.
That's what I'm saying. So there could be some pop-ups. There could be some.
There always are. We got a really big, extensive list right now as far as guys that are going to be in throughout the week, but that list is going to continue to grow. We're going to add some more bigger names throughout the week. We're going to have interviews with these kids, get some intel about these visits. Who are guys that Alabama's really going to be going after once these visits are completed? Are they going to continue to evaluate? Are they going to say, hey, maybe these aren't guys for us right now? We'll circle back down the road. But we'll have a lot of intel on BamaOnLine.com, especially on the BOL roundtables. So come check us out. We'll be providing nuggets, updates, everything throughout the week. So come check us out, Bama Online.
There you go, Andrew Bone. Thanks a lot, my man.
All right, guys. Y'all have fun.
There he goes, Andrew Bone, dropping some wealth of knowledge for us on a Monday morning. And with that, we transition to our guy, Jimmy Stein, team expert for us at BamaOnline.com. And oh, by the way, Jimmy, today is just the first day that Alabama will hit the practice field without Nick Saban. I guess the COVID situation in 2020, you have to take into account a little bit. They had that thing wired technology-wise where Nick was at home coaching, kind of like Max Headroom or something. But just some initial thoughts on that, man. Sort of the surreality, I guess you could call it, of what today entails.
I think a lot of Alabama fans, since the announcement, since Coach Saban announced he's retired, there's probably some Alabama fans literally dealing with psychiatric denial, it didn't really happen. And I think for those folks in particular, it's going to hit home post-practice, that post-practice press conference with Kalen DeBoer talking about what happened at practice and his opinion about the players and how they performed at practice with that Coke bottle that may or may not be delivered by Cedric Burns. I think that's when it's going to hit home for a lot of people. Wow, we're flipping the page. The page that's been open for 17 years, we're flipping it. And so I think it's to some level an emotional day, to that extent. But I'm excited. It feels like New Year's to me. I hope a lot of people understand that this is the 2024 football team. Only about 4, 5, 6 guys won't be there. That will be there in the fall. Maybe a couple of guys will sign in the transfer portal. But this is the 2024 football team practicing for the first time. So it feels sort of like New Year's Day to me.
Yeah, all the early enrollees now. You're pretty much, obviously, guys like Ryan Williams still coming down the pike. But, yeah, I mean, for the most part, and perhaps you do a little bit of patchwork in that later portal, this is going to be largely the core of your football team. Tim, does it make it a little bit easier, though, with Saban's departure that, we continue to see him in Tuscaloosa? We saw him at the basketball game on Saturday night. We see him with Kalen DeBoer. I'm sure there's a fine line. There's a balance, right, between being involved and being maybe too much. What do you think of that dynamic to this point as we head into this pretty monumental day?
I think, yeah, absolutely, it's good to see him because I'm not sure many of us knew for sure whether he would just speed off in that parking lot like in a movie, and that's the last time we saw him, or if he would be around. Because you're right, the thin line there is a very thin line. Now, I think he's handled it like you'd expect him to handle it as a guy who's been asked questions for the last 15 or 20 years, right? He's been constantly on the phone calls with other head coach. I think he said, my door's open. Come talk to me if you want to. That's the key to not being intrusive. If he's over there going, hey, man, I'm not sure why y'all blitzed on third down, that's where the rub goes the wrong way. But if the coach if hypothetically Kane Womack came over and said, I feel like I shouldn't have blitzed on third down, they can have a conversation. I think Saban's proven himself when you're like that alpha, that confident, you don't feel like you don't have to run around. That's why it kills me when people scream I'm an alpha and I'm a winner. You don't have to tell us if you are. We know if you're an alpha, if you're a winner, because, we listen to you or we're scared of you, or you got the track record. So I think it's great seeing him around there, seeing him at the game. I think it's most important seeing him happy. I think that's made a lot of fans. But Jimmy's right. It's sentimental because every day I've seen a post, I think of, holy crap, he's gone. You know what I mean? Thank you. Yes, please like and subscribe.
I'm just a dude playing a dude, checking in there in the comments.
That's a long title. I was scared to do that, but I like.
You can run into something on those.
Yeah, I was like, wait, you know how I am with names. I just called him Steve. Once I see those vowels. But yeah, I think having Saban around and seeing him's big. But the sentiment is there because I see people in threads almost once a day, and y'all probably see it going, I can't believe he's gone. Like, holy crap. Monday, but like Jimmy said, Monday, today it's officially over when you see Kalen DeBoer on that football field. I'm excited, though. I'm really excited.
Jimmy, it's got to be weird for Nick Saban, too, right? I mean, think about Nick Saban today. Do you even stay in Tuscaloosa today? That would be tough it's got to be.
Probably not. I would think like for a player like a Tom Brady, I'm sure when he made his decision to retire and then the Buccaneers opened training camp, I don't even know that it occurred to him that he was missing anything. He was probably fishing, hanging out with more, Victoria's Secret models, having a beer with the boys. He didn't miss a thing. But then there was opening weekend and there was a game. I bet it killed him the day that he couldn't play in the game. To Saban, today is the game. I mean, I think Nick Saban was at his happiest when he was doing football, working with his cornerbacks. I think that's what he lived for, X's and O's with his staff in defensive staff meetings. He lived for that stuff. So I think it is hard on Coach Saban today, probably even as much or more so than the games in the fall. And I would be surprised if he was around Tuscaloosa or around the football building today. I think now is a time you definitely get out of the way. You just keep your phone ready in case. It seems that Saban and Kane Womack will have some level of working relationship.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
It might be like that old song, I Ain't Missing You at All. No matter what Miss Terry says. You know what I mean? It's got to be, you're right. It's got to be a little bit rough. I agree with Jimmy. Coaching was more. I always thought recruiting. I think he might miss recruiting because, again, relationships. He liked getting on the phone. He liked talking with people. He loved hosting people. And we've seen that personality out, going back to the comedian, which kind of shocked us right out of the gate. He's having a chit chat with the comedian, sitting in one of the best Alabama selfies of all time. So, yeah, I'm with Jimmy, though. I think this it's bittersweet.
Jay Malone chiming in here in the comments says, I can't wait to retire. Got another 30 years or so, though.
Oh, no.
I hear you on that, Jay. I hear you. Hey, Charlie Potter, our senior writer at BamaOnLine.com, on the website first thing this morning on this Monday, great compilation of thoughts from the Bama Online staff in terms of things we'll be most interested in as the Crimson Tide cranks up 2024 spring drills. We'll go through a few of these with Tim Watts because we need Tim's input on these to go along with Jimmy's. Tim, top position battle for this team going into practice on Monday. Which way you going with that one? It's not a battle, but I'm most interested to see the quarterbacks, I think. That would be where my eyes would be glued. Also, edge. I'd be really interested to see exactly who's coming out at edge. Is it Pierre? Is it Quay? Is it Keon Keeley? A lot of guys, me, I go straight to the recruits. I don't know if battle's the right word, but I think there is some jockeying going on at every position. I think it's open battle in a lot of ways for a lot of positions. I'd love to see offensive tackle, the defensive ends, and the quarterback position. That'd be where I start. Jimmy, I was torn between offensive tackle and corner, and Tim just hit on a couple of those. I think both areas, if you're in one of those spots, it's wide open. It's a great, great chance for one of those guys to step forward. It's also an area where, who knows, maybe down the road, if things don't get answered in the way the staff would like in 15 practices this spring, there's some additions that are made. What about you? Were you kind of in that area as well?
Exactly. I mean, my thought immediately went to offensive tackle and corner, but like you just said, Travis, is so true. How much mental energy do you want to expend on that when there's a pretty good chance that those positions will be addressed in the spring portal? Pretty good chance. We don't know that. It's a great opportunity, though. That's why my answer was cornerback. It's a great opportunity at corner this spring when there's so few options and most of the options are young. But maybe, Mo Linguist goes to a young corner like Zay Mincy and as part of the pep talks, like, you got 15 practices to convince me not to go to the portal. You sell me these 15 practices that I don't have to go to the portal to find a corner. And you give that speech to Mincy, and you give that speech to Jalen and Bachway, and you give that speech to Xavier and Brown. And it's their opportunity. Don't go to the portal. I got this. And the same thing at tackle with the young tackles, Wilkin Formby, Miles McVay. Hey, sell me on that I don't have to go get a starting tackle, that you're the guy. So that's what's interesting to me. That's why the answer to me is corner and tackle, because of the opportunities that those young guys have. But I also know in all likelihood, they're not going to put themselves in a position where they're entirely dependent on someone who's never played the spot in a college football game before, and they're going to at least take a long look at what they can get out of the portal. But it's corner and tackle for me, because that's where you need the immediate help. That's where there's holes.
We say this, but the three of us are at practice, and Austin Mack or Dylan gets under quarterback. We leave the tackles and cornerbacks without even looking back.
My answer in the piece was quarterback to start. Now, I was half joking about that, but it's true.
Hey, if Austin Mack's throwing, the three of us would just be like, it's like that gif where he's looking away from his girlfriend. We would be watching Dylan throw. I'm excited to see. I mean, we tie all of them. The guys we haven't really seen. So I think it's a lot of good stuff happening at practice.
Returning player with the most to prove was one of the questions posed to the BOL staff. I went back to tackle for Elijah Pritchett, Tim. You've talked about the edge positions, I think maybe more so in relation to some second-year guys. But there's a couple of veterans at outside linebacker like Q Robinson, like Keanu Coote that are in that mix. You've got some returning players in the secondary, certainly, that have a lot to prove. Which way would you go with that one? Defensive line, you pick a lot of places.
To me, there's two guys that jump out because I think they have NFL potential. One of them high NFL potential, and that's Tim Smith. Tim Smith's a guy I think you're playing your Jeff Blauser money year. Show us the Dancing Bears. Show us, in a system you might be a little bit more comfortable with. Show us what I think is first-round potential. And Elijah Pritchett. I mean, there's somehow he started at left tackle in the spring game. So and I understand it wasn't a great performance, but they saw something in him to get him out there. If you look at him, I mean, he's as pretty on the hoof as anybody you're going to see getting off the bus. Obviously, there's some talent there. And if you ever wanted an opportunity to grab a tackle spot, and if you're the starting tackle at if you're the starting offensive tackle at Alabama, you're going to end up in the NFL most likely. So these are two for me. But I do agree with Robinson. I think he's a guy that has a chance to shine and get out there, because if he's ever – you get rid of Dallas, who just went and just took over a spot for 3 years, Braswell, who was really good. So now you got equal opportunity playing with younger guys. So hopefully, again, find the ball, get the ball type of year for him.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think you were kind of in line with Tim there, weren't you?
Yeah, my answer was Tim Smith right off the bat, just because I think there's been a pattern under Freddie Roach, which is really a positive pattern to me, that for the past, I think, 4 years, there has been a senior defensive lineman or a defensive lineman in his contract year. Tim, as a brand guy like myself, I love the Jeff Blauser contract year reference. But a senior or someone in their contract year has been a good player and then makes a big leap. And we saw that with Christian Barmore make a big leap in his last year. Then we saw it the next season with Phil Mathis, who jumped into day 2. We saw it the next year with Byron Young, who jumped into day 2. This year, I think we saw Justin Aboigbe do it. He hasn't been drafted yet, and who knows, maybe the medical could keep him out of day 2. But as a player on the field, Justin Aboigbe was a day 2 guy to me. And now it's on Tim Smith. That's how I see it. Now Tim Smith, to me, has to follow Barmore, Mathis, Young, and Aboigbe and be that guy. You've been good. You've been fine. You've been part of things. But if you want to be day 2 or higher, there's one more step you need to make. I think he'll make it. I think there's a lot on him, and I think it can be a big payoff for Alabama. I see Tim Smith as being a real disruptive, high-quality player in this league in his final year.
As far as newcomers, Tim, between the transfer portal arrivals and the early enrollees from the high school ranks, give us your newcomer that you're most intrigued by as we get these drills going.
I'll probably go with basically all the transfer guys, right? I'll basically go. I mean, I got to see Damani. He'd be at the top of my list. Keon Saab, I definitely want to get a look at him in this system. Although he's been here 6 weeks less than Damani Jackson has, so there's probably quite the learning curve. Jeremy Bernard, I really would like to see Jeremy Bernard because I think he's got wide receiver one potential. I mean, obviously the class was loaded from that from a signee standpoint, but Caleb Odom, if I had to choose from the prep ranks, so that's probably a guy. I mean, low-hanging fruit, really, if you look at it. Guys that we think most of them would expect to see, but there's a reason we all probably have them on our list, right?
Absolutely.
They're guys, highly recruited guys or highly functional guys.
Yeah, I went with Damani Jackson. If he's what he should be and can be, although he was evaluated by the previous staff for a different system than the one he's stepping into right now, they should be good at one corner spot. And that takes care of a lot of issues. And,
Absolutely.
I added Austin Mack here too. Not so much because I'm thinking he's going to make a run at the job in 2024. I just think big picture wise, right? It could be very interesting to get a look at him and how he might fit what Kalen DeBoer and this new staff want at the quarterback position for the future.
There's some pressure on Austin Mack if you think about it from the fans, right?
Yeah, I mean he's going to be tethered. He's going to be tethered to Julian Sayin, right?
Yeah, he's the one that ran off Julian Sayin. So this is a chance for Kalen DeBoer to look like a genius, right? Or them to question whether it was the right move. So I have no idea either way, but I know that everybody I've dug into about Austin Mack absolutely loves him. And the people that went in after the the people I know that are in the coaching industry or evaluating industry, when they dug into him after the commitment, when the dust settled there, I haven't heard a negative thing yet.
Jimmy, let's talk about staff. And this was one of the questions Charlie had for us in the BOL staff preview for spring practice. And that's the assistant coach that maybe is going to attract the most interest as we get spring drills underway. I went defense with this one. I think offense is where you want to look because that's going to be primarily, at least early on, the identity of Kalen DeBoer teams at Alabama. What about you? Where did you go?
Yeah, I went offense and Nick Sheridan. I realize it's Kalen DeBoer's offense, but Nick Sheridan is the OC. He's going to call the plays per Kalen DeBoer. And hey, I'm going to be honest here and saying, Nick Sheridan doesn't have the resume that a lot of recent OC hires at Alabama have had, not even Tommy Rees. It's not like Nick Sheridan has been the OC at Notre Dame for 4 years. He was the OC at Indiana about 4 years ago, but he doesn't have Lane Kiffin's resume or Steve Sarkisian's resume, or even going back to Doug Nussmeier, Jim McElwain. He doesn't have a weighty resume. But when you look into Nick Sheridan, son of Bill Sheridan, Michigan quarterback for 5 years, side by side with Kalen DeBoer, watch some interviews, get to know his personality, see his background of coaching a few spots on offense, not always quarterback, though he's been primarily a quarterback guy. I see Nick Sheridan as a great prospect, no different than we look at the recruiting, right? With Tim and Andrew and Joseph Hastings looking at prospects. Nick Sheridan, to me, is a fantastic OC prospect. And that's what makes this exciting to me. I think he could be great, especially working with Kalen DeBoer, because you could argue for as much as Ryan Grubb had a ton of success, and he did. Look at him now, NFL OC. Did DeBoer create that? And is DeBoer going to create the same thing with Sheridan? So I'm excited to see this great opportunity because I'm sure Nick Sheridan realizes it. It's a heck of an opportunity to be handed the OC job at Alabama, because not only is it high profile and it can make your career, you're also handed a bunch of dudes. He's got some dudes that he didn't have it in Indiana and might not have almost anywhere else.
What about it, Tim? Who do you got? Assistant coach of note here.
I got to go with Womack. I just got to go with the swarm and the new names and the aggressive style and the.
When you start putting hashtags and names on your system, does that add to the pressure, or do you even care? Or is it all about marketing?
I think it's about marketing. I think it's a recruiting pitch. I mean, be part of the swarm the swarm, that verb describes exactly what you want as a defender, right? Be aggressive and attack as a pack.
It's something we haven't really seen at Alabama all that much, have
We
we,
haven't
though?
seen any of this. I mean, Kalen DeBoer tweets, and I instantly start checking his followers to see if that's a real account. It's been banana. Yeah, there's so many different things. I mean, seeing him on a radio or hearing him on a podcast. I mean, there's so many things that are different. But with me, Womack, it's going to start with Womack just because we spent all that time with Saban and Kirby and Pruitt, and Pete. Defensive coordinator was always heavily discussed, right? Now I think we're seeing a whole new system. Look, we've seen offenses. We've saw Tua's offense, right? The 4 rideouts, the friggin' 3 first-round, basically NFL first, second-round picks, Irv Smith, a second-round pick, running backs. We saw an offense that was unbelievable, but we've always seen the same defense. We haven't seen a variation of that yet. Now we're getting not just a variation, but, it's getting titles. It's the swarm, and you got all the names that go with it, and you got all these guys. And to be honest, there's so many guys. I think we always wanted the young guys to play, and Saban was less likely to trust most young guys. So a lot of times they were held back. I mean, Dre barely played his freshman year. You had to be like a Minka. You know what I mean? You had to be like a NASA engineer, you know what I mean, or a borderline heart surgeon, and run a 4.39 and be 6'1" and 2 to really get on the field early in a lot of these chances. I mean, we never saw Quinnen. We didn't see Quinnen his freshman year. There's a lot of guys. I think in this system, it's just throw them out there because the way this is, the way it's attacked, they're going to give up big plays. I don't think they worry about it. I think they know sometimes they're going to give up a big play, but I think they believe the end will justify the means in this. And that's why I'm pretty excited just to see. And there's so many guys on that side of the ball I want to see run fast. You know what I mean? To hit somebody, attack. We got a lot of guys. We got a lot of sick'em guys on that defense.
Yeah, it appears to be the case. I understand the change of Ryan Grubb and kind of also with Scott Huff staying behind in Seattle. Maybe some of the gnashing of teeth that brought with it. But I just continue to go back to with DeBoer and Nick Sheridan and Jamarcus Shepard, you've still got continuity on the offensive side of the ball. And with that, I went with the defensive side of the ball. And to be more specific, I went with Mo Linguist and Colin Hitzler because they appear to be sort of the two-headed approach on the back end. And there's a ton of production to replace in the areas that they're going to oversee. And that's before you take recruiting into account. So we had some different picks there. It was a lot of fun with Charlie's piece, no doubt about it. You know what else we've got, guys? We've got some serious March basketball upon us. And look, it didn't work out the way everyone would have liked ultimately Saturday with Tennessee in town and essentially the SEC regular season championship, we think anyway, up for grabs. But what a historic day, Tim, for Alabama men's basketball from start to finish. Alabama relevant to championship discussion. Alabama relevant to national discussion as evidenced by the presence of College Game Day and everything that went with it. And it just goes back to, again, what Nate Oates has done during his time at Alabama basketball. It wasn't a win on the court. There are no moral victories for a coach and a program that's won SEC titles 2 of the last 3 years. But at the end of the day, man, what a day for Alabama hoops.
Yeah, it's a dub. I mean, that's a win. That's a win to get that kind of respect. The funny thing to me is every time Nate loses a game, Alabama loses a game, we get an explanation from several people on what Alabama needs to win. Luckily, they don't give us that many opportunities to say that. There's a lot more wins than losses. I'm just going to tell you, we're not going to Shaquille O'Neal in the post. There's going to be no David. There's not those guys.
No Robert Parrish. No Robert Parrish.
Yeah, Robert Parrish, McHale. That is not happening. It doesn't matter what y'all want. I mean, if you want that, there's plenty of schools doing that you can follow. This is his system. He's not going to change his system. I personally think it's by far his greatest coaching job because I'm not sure I don't see a first round pick on that roster. I'm not sure there's a lot of NBA, there might be some 2As. There's not a lot of straight NBA guys on this team right now, in my opinion. But they are competitive. Travis, this one thing I thought about. Well, you and I have discussed this before. When you have that event, like LSU, Alabama, the 9-6 game, the home team is often at a distraction when you think about it, because you've got people running around, you got famous people, you're like in your gym, your routine's different. Tennessee's an excellent basketball team. In my opinion, they're a better, more talented basketball team than Alabama. I think that was the deciding factor this weekend. I think they're good. They've got talent. They've got everything you look for. I mean, Alabama had the home court advantage and had a chance to win, obviously. But Tennessee's a really good basketball team. I think they've proven that all year. So the loss doesn't bother me as much. But I do wonder, you're still missing Trelly. You had all the distraction at home. And regardless of what they say, it's distracting. And for Tennessee, it was business as usual, right? Roll up in the bus, get your shoot around, hit the hotel, and go and play. So I would do it again. I would do it again. I think it was a win for Alabama basketball and for Nate. And I think there was a lot of eyes on that weekend for us. So I agree.
Yeah, Jimmy, you get a game in which Dalton Connect, the Tennessee star, scores only 13, goes 5 of 14 from the field, but Alabama in good shape there in the second half with a 7-point lead. Even at the under 8, you felt okay about things, but then just the offensive inefficiency and an ineffectiveness down the stretch. I think it was 3 of 21 down the stretch from the field. And you get 22 from Mark Sears in the game. Estrada gives you 16. But Rylan Griffin with just 5, and you had the foul trouble with Grant, who was so critical. It was good to see a guy like Davin Cosby and stretches step up at times, but just not good enough. And you give Tennessee some credit for that, because as we've talked about in the past, this always felt like, in terms of just matchups for Alabama here in the last 5, 6, 7 regular season games, it was always going to be the toughest.
Yeah, I kind of came away more impressed with Tennessee than I was down about Alabama. I mean, Alabama's a really good team. If you'd have told me before this season started that this team could finish second in the SEC and a top 4 type seed in the NCAA tournament, I would have told you you're crazy, based on you lost 4 or 5 starters, the entire bench, 3 assistant coaches to come back from that and even finish second and just be in contention to win the SEC is incredible. This is how good Tennessee is, guys. Tennessee was picked to win the SEC. I went back and looked at SEC media days. Tennessee was picked to win the league, and that was before anyone knew what Dalton Connect was. Dalton Connect was not a thing back on media days. He wasn't in first or second team all SEC as picked by the media, and now he's almost certainly going to be either player of the year or competing with Mark Sears for that title. But Tennessee was picked to win this league before we knew Dalton Connect could be the first college player taken in the NBA draft. So I think this Tennessee team's very good. I walked out of Coleman Saturday night. I remember in my head going, well, I think I was going to put UConn and Houston in my Final Four. I think I'm going to put Tennessee in there too. I mean, I just real impressed with them, but couldn't be more impressed with Nate Oates and Alabama, what they've done.
You mentioned Latrell Wrightsell earlier, and it's been this extended stretch now that he hadn't been able to go up to 4 games. Realistically, even if he comes back for Florida tomorrow night, what's a reasonable expectation for him, given the time away and how well he was playing and what he meant to this team? Now, maybe he jumps back in there and it's seamless. That's obviously the hope. I know they've been ramping him back up to hopefully a situation here in a pretty immediate future where he's able to go. But I think it just underscored too, those last 8-10 minutes of that game against Tennessee, what he means to this team.
Yeah. We also need to give a shout out to Nick Pringle, who's playing some of his best basketball right now. Yep. I mean, that dude, when it's big, I mean, he's 4 for 4 from the field, 5 of 7 free throws, ended up with 9 rebounds. Yeah. But Trell, we saw him working out before on the basketball court. I mean, basketball, it's such a repetition sport. And this guy's been doing it since 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, probably. I think his shot is his shot. So once he gets that in, I think he's going to be fine. I mean, you don't want to jump right back in and be in Gainesville, obviously. But there's so much basketball left to be played. I think Nate Oates and his staff see the big picture, right? You want to win the SEC. But splitting Florida and Tennessee is still on the table. And it's what you and I discussed, in our show last week. You want to split those 2 games, come out of that 5-game stretch at 3-2, because you know what? there is a ton of basketball left to be played with these teams. Tennessee, Alabama's got Florida and then Arkansas. Tennessee still got South Carolina and Kentucky. South Carolina is a zombie. They should have been dead 40 times. They refuse to friggin' go away. And Kentucky, Tennessee loses this next one. Kentucky and Tennessee with a 1-game gap for the close of the season.
Still a lot on the line.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's elimination. I mean, it's still
double bye in the SEC tournament potentially. You want to salvage as much of that as you can, and went out because who knows? What could happen, as you said, with Tennessee.
I mean, I was talking to our Tennessee publisher, Grant Ramey, who covers basketball for our Tennessee site, and we were going through the rankings. There could still be a 5-way tie for this championship. Still could be and it's not even that far of a stretch if you look at the schedule, because, again, you still got Florida battling Alabama. You got Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, Tennessee. So, but I do agree with Jimmy. I think that this was more about Tennessee's a good basketball team than Alabama. Obviously, you want to be at full force when you play them. Shooting up 25-26% from three is always going to be an issue. I do think the limit thing Tennessee did the best was they limited their turnovers. I think they had 5 or 6. Alabama had double digits. I think they got the most out of their possessions, and Alabama struggled a little bit. But look, Tennessee's an old team.
Yeah,
they've got a lot of experience on that team, not to mention just talent, but they got talent and an older basketball team. So I think this is more of a hats off to Tennessee moment than I do think it's anything to do with Alabama. They just didn't close out particularly well.
Crimson Tide takes on the Florida Gators Tuesday night. That game time was changed last week from 8 Central to 6 Central to ESPN. And so senior night in Gainesville, Gators coming off a tough road loss against that aforementioned zombie-like South Carolina team. So both teams looking ahead to the SEC tournament postseason play, seeding on multiple fronts, a lot on the line Tuesday night in Gainesville. Hey, guys, wanted to touch on real quickly Alabama at the NFL Combine here. Tim is a Combine junkie. He is our senior Combine correspondent. I know Jimmy and myself are interested as well because we watch all these guys, not just the Alabama guys, but I know the draft people and the NFL people try to act like these guys all just showed up to the Combine, don't have 3 or 4 or 5 years experience in SEC or college football, but still something of note. So, Tim, I'm going to ask you this. Biggest news item involving an Alabama player in Indianapolis over the weekend, was it Kool-Aid with the injury revelation, Dallas Turner with just a performance of all performances, maybe a guy that surprised you either way?
Yeah, I think Dallas, we knew what he was. I knew he was a good athlete. What he did was an absurd 1%, less than 1% athlete, though, to look the way he did and all. Now, this draft's going to be so interesting because I don't know who's going defense. Most of the projections, it's a heavy wide receiver. It's a heavy quarterback draft as far as, what it looks like. People have to factor in those two positions sell uniforms and sell seats. You want to see the big wide receiver. You definitely want to see the big quarterback. So that factors in. Not as many people dying to see. Will Anderson had a great year, but of course we heard more about Stroud, who also had a great year, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm curious to see, because in most years, I'd be shocked Dallas snuck out of the top 5. I mean, I think if you put him in last year's draft, they'd be debating him or Will Anderson, right? I mean, that's how, Will went 3rd, so I think that did it. Nothing else surprised me. It stunk for Kool-Aid because we really wanted to see him run. I don't know where Kool-Aid's going to be drafted. I think the speed's the uncertainty, but I do know.
Do you think there was already an undercurrent of this situation maybe that had gotten out and that was impacting him in some of the draft mocks, or it kind of lines up that way now in retrospect?
It's possible. I mean, you can see a guy drop for an injury where they said they expect him to be ready for the football season, but I mean, the hairs are split. I remember Warren Sapp smoked a joint and fell to 20th. You know what I mean? So nowadays the GM will be smoking the joint with Warren. So, I mean, you never know what'll make somebody drop. But the one thing I know is every team I've talked to loves Kool-Aid. He might not be, Revis Island, but most of them aren't. I was hoping Arnold ran faster because I thought he had a chance to jump into that top 8 to 10 range in the draft. I don't know what he is now. I don't think he hurt his stock. I think he is what we know. We probably know he's not so much a cornerback number one, but the flexibility, the position versatility is what we were looking for. And I thought Braswell did well. I think Braswell helped himself.
4'6", right? Around there.
Yeah. And at that size, I mean, he ran well. He looked smooth in his drills. Oh, and Latham. I thought Latham, who definitely looked lighter as we predicted earlier in the year. We expected him to be lighter at the combine. He looked and moved really well, in my opinion.
Tackle heavy draft too, it sounds like. So
yeah, he's got a battle. Yeah.
Tackles, wide receivers, quarterbacks going to be very popular, it sounds like. Jimmy, what about your biggest takeaway from over the weekend with these Alabama guys?
Yeah, I don't think what Dallas did. I mean, the actual number, the vert number, the 40 number, that might be a little surprising. It was so good, but I think Dallas may have cemented himself as the first defender taken in the draft, which is super significant. I mean, to be the very first. I mean, Will Anderson was a year ago. For Alabama to produce that a second year in a row is crazy. But I think Dallas cementing himself as the very possible first defender taken in an offensive heavy draft. I think we know that it's going to be a surprise at this point if there's not a few quarterbacks at the top and then an incredible wide receiver group with Neighbors and Adunze and Marvin Harrison, of course. All those guys could go before a defender goes, but Dallas Turner as the first defender in the draft was the great Alabama news. A little unfortunate with Kool-Aid for sure. But Braz, hey, that 4.6 number only pales in comparison to Dallas. It compared pretty well to all the other edge defenders. I think it was the fourth or fifth fastest 40 for all the edge guys. So Braz, might sneak into the end of round one, maybe, but it's certainly a slam dunk for round two.
That 3.5 over/under total we threw out there, Tim, for first round
right
picks.
On the edge.
It's going to be right there, isn't it? It's going to be right there.
I think between Braswell and Kool-Aid, I think one of them will end up in the bottom half of that draft because, again, when you're drafting the bottom half of the draft, you're doing something right, and you usually need a piece or two, and you don't have to worry as much about 8 to 10 years of football. You're just trying to get first contract football, right? So if you can plug a Kool-Aid into your second door and give yourself a chance to, compete for a Super Bowl, I think you will. And again, you can't get enough edge rushers.
Sarita Vlogs here in the comments. Shout out to Alabama baseball and softball. Yeah, guys, first loss for both of those clubs over the weekend. Alabama softball falls to South Alabama, and Alabama baseball on Sunday in a Donnybrook against Dallas Baptist. Drops the third and final game of its trip out to Frisco, Texas. All in all, though, Jimmy, I'd say some really positive stuff from two teams that, again, you talk about 19-1, I guess it is for Alabama softball. Alabama baseball, certainly nothing to be ashamed about with that start.
Yeah, the loss to South was unfortunate, but you also, that was sandwiched around 2 wins around powerhouse Arizona, beating Arizona twice. Those wins will pay off big when it comes down to seeding for the NCAA tournament later on. And the best thing you could say about both softball and baseball, I think softball's ranked about 10th and ascending, and baseball ranked around 15th and ascending. So this will be fun years. It's early. The conference games start for softball this week, for baseball the following week. But guys, I think even at this juncture, you can say these will be postseason teams. We will very likely see them in the NCAA tournaments, their respective NCAA tournaments, perhaps even hosting regionals. To me, that's the challenge for both baseball and softball. Can you go out and have the type of conference season where you end up hosting a regional? And I think it's very possible for both teams.
Alabama football in the college football playoff. Alabama men's and women's basketball going to be in NCAA tournament action. And then the potential for both baseball and softball to make postseason play as well. Yeah, I think you'll take that just about every time.
Travis, did you see the end of the Arizona game Saturday? It was streaming on some weird service, so I only caught highlights. But did you see them try to steal home?
Baseball. Yeah, the Saturday, because Alabama baseball played Arizona, Alabama softball played Arizona. Yeah, I mean, you don't see that very often. And you look, and a lot of times, guys, a pitcher will balk in that situation.
Yeah.
Panic, won't step off.
Well, the coach nicely tossed him right under the bus. You know what I mean? It was a gentle toss, but he made it clear
It's
that
an
was
early in the season toss. Now, if
Yeah,
that's
it
a
was not a-
season-ending
It was
loss,
basically,
the
we'll learn
toss
from
isn't as
this, but
kind.
that was not the moment for that. We did not call that. Hey, you know what? This is what happens when you get guys out there and you practice stuff. They start thinking, "Oh, I got it," because
Oh,
who
yeah.
doesn't want to steal home? You know
Oh,
what I
yeah.
mean? We all want to steal home.
It's going to be on SportsCenter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Top 10
And it
plays.
was. It probably was.
Yeah, it probably made it, just not for the reasons Arizona had hoped. Guys, as always, appreciate it. If you got anything else before we get out of here, let's get it out there now. Tim, Jimmy,
No, I just
Excited
good?
about today. Excited about today. It feels like
closing arguments.
this is a holiday for me. I mean, it's the first time. To me, it's just hugely significant. Not just Saban to DeBoer, but this is the very first time the 2024 Alabama football team will practice. And I know they're missing a handful of guys they'll need in the fall, like Ryan Williams and maybe some transfer portal guys in the spring. But this is the football team, and they're practicing for the first time. And it won't be too long, just a little bit less than 6 months now from the first game.
Tim, we talking about practice? Hell yeah, we talking about practice, right?
Yeah, they misrepresented my boy AI on that too. You have to watch that whole interview. They really did him no justice. Also, AI probably didn't have to practice. He probably could also play the NFL while he played the NBA. But I agree with Jimmy. I'm excited to see it, and it happened like, with us. Usually we're sectional, where we get through signing day, we get February off. We didn't get crap off. We didn't get crap off them. When we went straight through this, we just finished the staff. What did they finish the staff? 10 days ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, they took 2 from
They
Baylor.
just announced a few of them officially a few days ago. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's a few more that haven't been announced, right? Are
Could
they
be.
all out? I need to check on that.
I think
think
they've
it's
announced
complete
the
now.
on the field guys.
Yeah.
But the off-field guys were never really announced. And my understanding,
You just go look at the staff directory for those folks.
You can't. Yeah, there's so many. You get banned on Twitter if you tweeted all them out. There's so many. Elon to come down on you pretty hard. But
That's
yeah,
right.
I agree. The excitement's there. You got practice. You got Florida. You got open practice on Wednesday. Photos, videos,
Media viewing opportunity. Not
Yes,
entirely
media.
open, but we expect to be able to pull from that.
Yeah, you people.
on Wednesday.
They're not saying you people can go, but we
Right.
can go. We're just letting you
People
know.
are going to show up, and Tim Watts said
Yeah.
I could come to practice.
We're
Tim
just saying we're
Watts.
kind of a big deal, and the average person is, and that's all I was saying. We'll have video and photos. So
We hope to have a ton of coverage, obviously, from Alabama spring football. You've got Alabama hoops. So much right now at
How's it been since we've been
BamaOnline.com.
in a practice? What was the
Recruiting.
last
2021. I think 2021.
Yeah, I remember it.
But it was brief. I don't think it was the whole season.
You know what? Not so much. No, it was like a one-off in camp.
Yeah, it was very few. And then, rumor is somebody said something they shouldn't have. And Coach Saban said that's that.
Yeah. Well, guys, we'll have it all.
Coach Saban leaked it. Coach Saban probably posted it on the message board and then said, "Enough of this."
It's the Potter rule. They call it the Potter rule. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're going to have tons for you. And by the way, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel right here for BamaOnLine.com. BamaOnLine.com. I'm wearing down here. It's getting late, guys. Tim Watts. You've got, of course, Jimmy Stein, Andrew Bone, so much good stuff for us. The rest of our staff, Charlie Potter, Clint Lamb, Joseph Hastings. The list goes on and on at BamaOnline.com. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. See you soon.
Awesome.
For Tim Watts, Jimmy Stein, Andrew Bone, thanks for joining us right here on the YouTube home for BOL. And until next time, so long, everybody.